Awesome. All right. So where we're going to pick up is where we left off. So we're picking up on page 44, the chapter 4, We Agnostics. And man, this is, I know some people, yeah, you guys are excited. We Agnostics. And how cool is that, by the way? Because if your experience is a little like my experience, when I first got here and I saw We Agnostics and I'm reading Agnostics, I'm like, I hate that chapter. It's stupid. What does electricity have to do with my sobriety? I hate it. But then I read this chapter with somebody, who's armed with facts about themselves, who have gone through this chapter, and that chapter comes alive. And then doesn't it become like everyone's favorite chapter, right? And I love that. I love that, having an open mind, having a new experience. And ironically, that's exactly what this chapter is about. Laying aside our old ideas about a higher power, about God, about step 2, and seeking a new experience. In fact, changing our mind. So let's kick it off. And where we're going to dive right into is the title. Ooh, exciting. She's going to go on a title tangent for 15 minutes. Yes, probably. I will try to reel it back in. So the title is We Agnostics. And you know what's interesting about that? Because we got some chapters that are for people. You know what I mean? We've got the chapter 2 wives, like four families who are loved ones of those affected by alcoholism. We got the family afterward, for the family after the spiritual awakening. We got the chapter 2 employers, so 4 employers. But we don't have the chapter 2, the agnostics. The chapter is We Agnostics. And what we're going to see is that each and every one of us, when we come to this second step, regardless of our beliefs, regardless of our religious sort of leanings or previous experience, we all have a little bit of agnosticism. So if you're, and I mean, who here came to the rooms of the 12 step and was like, the God thing, I got no problems with that, none whatsoever. I am open and willing and here for it, right? It really is we. So again, if you're new, if you're here, or maybe you're like, ooh, she's going to be talking about God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, and you're a little like, oh, I am bristling with antagonism. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. Fair enough. That was us. That was all of us. You're so not alone. And so we agnostics. Now, in our modern language, the word agnostic is kind of like maybe there is God, maybe there isn't. Now, I looked up the definition in my 1930s dictionary. Now, it's not the official 1930s dictionary, not that there's an official one, but Rob's got that one. I got the unofficial. No, it's not. And no, my dictionary isn't official. It's just old. I just got an old one. Anywho, so in my dictionary, I looked it up. And so agnostic is, now this was the lead-in definition, and I'm like, ooh, that's a little heavy. It was like one who denies that man possesses any knowledge of the ultimate nature of things. And I'm like, okay, that's a little intense. We'll back it up. And then it says one who neither affirms nor denies the existence of a personal deity. So that maybe there's a God, maybe there isn't. But now, I got an old dictionary, but we're going to go back even older. So we're going to go to the root or the etymology of the word agnostic. I know, please don't leave. Please stick it out. We will be doing an etymology tangent, but I promise it's worth it. So the word agnostic in its origins is Greek. And ag, as in agnostic, ag means without. And gnosis, as in Gnostic, means knowledge. So you can make a little note, we without knowledge. Now, some of you sponsor others, and some of you are sponsored. And either way, we've had this experience. Maybe it is your sponsor saying the same thing to you over and over and over again, or you're the sponsor sharing the same consideration over and over and over again. And what do we say, or what do we hear in return? Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know, Paige. Get off my back. I know. God. Oh. Who asked you for help? You did. That's why I'm your sponsor. But that's not the knowing that we're talking about. The gnosis is a heart level knowing. So the we agnostics, what that means is we without an experiential heart level knowing of God. That's what we're talking about. Without knowing. And if there's books and texts known as the Gnostic text or yeah, and those are about deep personal experiences, that heart level knowing. I recently did a kind of a bit of a talk about this, and it's like, some of y'all are married, right? Or engaged, or got a partner, got somebody in your life, right? Is it safe to say, if I maybe met your spouse, your partner, I might know that person? Or if you say, yeah, I'm married, my wife's name is so and so, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, I know so and so. Is it safe to say there's a difference between, oh yeah, I know your wife, and how you know your wife, your spouse, your partner, right? And that's what we're after now. How could I not mention, before the meeting, we were having a very serious adult conversation about Carl Jung action figures, and where we can procure them, and for a decent price. Because listen, we cannot afford $70 American in this economy with that exchange rate. Absolutely not. So we're talking about Carl Jung action figures. And as we talk about the word agnostic, I always got to share my Carl Jung story. And so Carl Jung is, and for those of you who have been coming, Carl Jung, he gave us knowledge of what our solution is here in 12 Step. And that solution being the spiritual awakening. We can see that story on page 26 and 27. And Carl Jung, there's this famous BBC interview where they're interviewing Carl Jung. And they ask him, growing up, did you believe in God? And he said, yes. Growing up, yeah, I believed in God. And he said, do you believe in God now? And Carl Jung says, no. And there's a pause. And he says, I've got no need for belief. And there's a pause. And he says, I know. You see, that is the knowing that I want to have. I don't have it when I come to the second step, but that is the knowing that I'm after. And if you don't believe me on that, I'm not done my etymology tangent. So in step 11, what we seek to do is improve our conscious contact with God. Yeah, absolutely. The interview is on YouTube. You can look it up. I've sent it to people before. And if somebody's kind enough to remind me, I will put the interview. Hey, welcome. We are on page 44. We haven't made it past the title. Perfect time. I will put the interview in the WhatsApp chat, but I will need somebody to remind me. Thank you. Step 11, we seek to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. So conscious, that word is Latin in origin, so not Greek, completely different language, but the word con in Latin means with, and shus or sire means knowing. So at step 2, when I come to the second step, I am agnostic. I am without knowing of God. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the actions of the rest of these steps to clear away the stuff within me that is blocking me from that power. And at step 11, I will have that with knowing. So I go from without knowing to with knowing. And it's that deep level, that deep heart level knowing. That's what we're after. So that's about 15 minutes on the title. So let's dive on in. So it says, in the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. Goodness, I sure hope we have. You know what I mean? Because it's been 44 pages, 3 formal chapters, plus the doctor's opinion and the preface and the forewords. You know what I mean? I sure hope we did. But just in case we didn't, let's summarize it into this little paragraph. It says, we hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. And this paragraph, if you are working with somebody, and if they're not sure whether or not they have a problem, this is the place to go. And I have a fondness for this paragraph because I talk about this a lot. I showed up with a whole lot of yeah buts and a whole lot of andas and buckets of denial and a whole lot of I'm different and I'm not like you and I don't got to do what you got to do. And I was terminally unique. Yes, I do have that as a sticker, but I was terminally unique. And it was page 44, what we're going to read, that was just simple enough that it needed to be to hit me between the eyes and cut through all those layers of denial that I had. And here it is, the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. So we can take that statement and turn it into a question. When I have honestly wanted to, could I quit entirely? We're asking ourselves, do we have the mental obsession? Is that my experience? Right? When I've honestly wanted to stay sober, have I been able to not take that first drink? Is that my experience? Well, mine is a day, a week, a month, several months down the line, I'm picking up again and off I go. And then it says or. I always point that out. It says or. I'll be honest with you guys, I'm an and, so I am deeply troubled, very much of the hopeless variety, but it says or. Or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take. So what we're asking there, taking that statement, turning it into a question, when drinking, do I have control over the amount I take? Or using or acting out on that compulsive behavior that brings you to this all-inclusive study, do I have control? And we can make a little note that what we're talking about there is the physical allergy. And my experience was, yeah, I couldn't stay quit and I had no control. That was me. And see, all those barriers, all the separateness that I had between me and you, that just cut it through. That was me. And then it says, you are probably alcoholic. Ta-da! So if I'm wondering, do I have this thing? Do I have control? Do I have choice? If the answer is no, probably alcoholic. And then, so I always talk about how step one is not good news. You know what I mean? Step one is like, it is bad. It's like the hammer of the gavel that I am doomed to relapse. I am doomed to do it again and again and again. Followed by something that I did not think was good news when I got here. It says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness. An illness, not that I'm bad, not that I'm weak, not that I'm immoral, but an illness over which only a spiritual experience will conquer. That spiritual experience, that is our solution. And man, we spoke about this on page 25. I was kind of hoping there'd be an easier, softer way. You know what I mean? I was kind of hoping there'd be like like option C, you know what I mean? But only a spiritual experience will conquer. And you know, one of the things that I love about this book is that so often it meets me where I'm at. See, sometimes I can think I got to be perfect to do this stuff. No, the book will meet me where I'm at and will take me where I need to go. So it says, to one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. Right? So if I'm coming here with some atheism, or I'm coming here with agnosticism, I'm coming here with old ideas, old beliefs, and goodness, I had buckets of them. I don't know why buckets are my unit of anything lately, but it's been buckets. Oh. It says, seems impossible, but to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And what does it mean to be an alcoholic of the hopeless variety? Because I mean, I was kind of hoping, again, for those of us who've been going through this thing, we're looking at hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. Because when I see my hopelessness, then I'm able to grab a hold of the hope that's on offer. And so how do I know if I'm an alcoholic of the hopeless variety or an addict or a compulsive, whatever brings you to the study of the hopeless variety? Can I control the amount I take every single time? Oh, I have not figured out how to turn that off. Got a little bubble with the thumbs up. I shouldn't do the doubles because then we'll get fireworks. Pew, 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 pew. Sorry. I knew that would happen and I would get distracted. So how do I know if I'm hopeless? I cannot control the amount that I take every single time. And when I've said, that's it, I never want to do it again. I never want to do it again. I've done it again. We got those two symptoms. And if I can relate to those two symptoms, I am an alcoholic or an addict or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study of the hopeless variety. And so it says to be doomed, another word for hopeless, you know what I mean? Doomed to an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face, right? That was my experience. You know what I mean? How bad of an alcoholic death? Do you really want me to make amends to my ex? You know what I mean? I'm fighting it on both ends. I don't want to do it, right? It's not an easy alternative to face. And again, the book is going to meet me where I'm at. But it isn't so difficult. Don't worry, it'll be okay. The bar to clearing the second step is far lower than we think. For those of you that know, I'll make the joke. The bar is even wheelchair accessible. You can just hop over that, no problem. That's funny for some of you that know that. Anywho, sorry. but it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. And that's something I want to point out. Half of the original first 180 members considered them, as they were coming, and considered themselves atheists or agnostic. So that idea of God being a hurdle to jump is not a new idea. It is not that much has changed in the, 80, 89, 88, 89 years since this thing began. It was a struggle for them then as well. So again, if it's a struggle for me, you're not alone. But that hurdle is one that we have gone over and we can get over, and the book is going to show us how. So it says at first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope that we were not true alcoholics, right? Maybe I just got to go to the gym, or maybe my problem is drinking with those Canadians, but if I go down to the States, it'll be different. Or, my problem is North Americans. I got to pop over to Thailand. Woo, I can drink like a lady, right? That was dangerous because I almost drink like a lady and then set off the fireworks in the background. Anywho, that'll be the trick to not make the little reactions happen. I'll make sure I turn them off for next week. So hoping against hope, we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must. We got a whole lot of musts in this book, must find a spiritual basis of life, which is a long dash, or else. I mean, that's some not gentle language. I've got to find a spiritual way of life or I will relapse. That's not good news. It wasn't for me. The good news is the hurdle isn't so high. But also I want to point out spiritual basis of life. What that is saying is that this is a way of life. This isn't a set it and forget it 30-day in, 60-day in, 90-day in. This is how I live my life upon the spiritual basis, upon these 12 steps that I take into every area of my life. And it says, perhaps it is going to be that way with you, but cheer up, right? So we know it's not good news when you're facing that. Oh man, I gotta get connected with God. I gotta address the God issue. Cheer up. It's okay. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or Gnostics. Again, half of the original first 180, right? They're saying it again. So that idea, if we're struggling with the conception of a power greater than ourselves, what we want to emphasize is you are not alone, and it is something that we can easily get over and work through. So it says, our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted. Don't worry about it. That's what it's saying. Don't stress yourself out. It goes on to say, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how much we tried. When we talk about what is a code, what is a philosophy? A code is belief, religious belief. A code could be things like, now I'm not criticizing the 4 agreements, but something like the 4 agreements. Anyone here try to read some spiritual books before they came into AA or NA or 12-step or whatever, right? 4 agreements. You know what I think the first one is? It's like, be impeccable with your word. I can't do that on my own. And then it's like, don't take things personally. Excuse me, do you know how sensitive? By the way, I'm going to ruin your day. Sorry. If anyone here is like, I am sensitive. Sensitive is just a synonym for self-centered. Ruined my day because I could see who I really was. I'm taking things personal. Man, I couldn't do it. So what we're trying to lens in on is belief is not enough to keep you sober. Beliefs, philosophies, ideas, wonderful. And we can explore them later on, but it's not enough. And it said, but we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources as marshaled, to be marshaled is to be led, or if we're going to use Rob's superficial definition, arrange, assembled. Yeah, like that we're going to put together, or I like the idea of led, like my human resources, everything that I can put together, led by my willpower, was not sufficient. It failed utterly. Is that not our experience? Who among us didn't have beliefs and ideas and codes of conduct, even if they were not great codes of conduct, that I just could not live up to and I wanted to? And I think that's part of why when I come to the rules of 12 step, I think I must be bad. I think I must be broken. I'm far worse than anyone else because I can't live up to them. No, the power isn't there. I don't have the power. And that's what this next paragraph, man, it's exciting. It says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. The dilemma is that I don't have enough power to keep myself sober. I don't have enough power to just magically be a good person who I always wanted to be. I don't have the power. Really, a step one proposition. We had to find a power by which we could live. This is how I am living my life based upon this power. And it had to be a capital P, power greater than ourselves. And it says obviously, right? Because if I don't have any power over my illness, right, I can't have something that is equidistant to the same level of power. You know what I mean? I need something that is more powerful because I don't got the power over my alcoholism or my addiction. I don't got it. So I need something that is more powerful than that. That makes sense. And so if the idea of God, we're going to talk about our barriers to belief in God, but if that freaks you out, what we're after is power. I don't have power. I need power. It's got to be one greater than me. It says obviously, but where and how are we to find this capital P power? And I point out the capital P's because I shouldn't say any, but most of the words in this book that are capitalized are synonyms. A synonym is a word that we can use instead of for God. That's what we're pointing to. Or a synonym for power, if you don't like that word God. That's what we're talking about. So where and how are we to find this capital B power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. How convenient, right? That's good news. I don't have power. I need a power. How do I get one? Well, the whole point of this book is to, well, actually, see, that's the thing. I get all excited and then I go off on a thing, but if I just read the next line, it'll say exactly what I'm going to say. So it's main object. So the main purpose of this book is to enable you to find a power, capital P power, greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. The problem gets solved, right? That to me points to that idea of recovered, not cured, recovered. The problem gets solved. That's what I need. So the main point of this whole book is to enable me to find a power that can lead me to that place of spiritual awakening, that place where the mental obsession is relieved. That's what I'm after. And that's why it's good to read the book, because it's got the directions to get me to go there, So it says that means we've written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. We're saying, yeah, we hear you. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. That neatly evaded, entirely ignored. I was like, cool, I don't got to go down that path. I'm good. That's what it means. Woo, I don't got to do it. And then it's like, dun, dun, dun. Oh, man, I got to have a look at this whole God thing. Yeah, that's okay that we feel that way. In fact, it goes on to say we know how he feels. And as we get into this paragraph is really looking at a lot of the barriers that many of us have had to belief in God. We know how he feels. That's our experience. We've gone through this, and here's how we bridge that gap. Here's how we overcome that hurdle. So we know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. It's okay to come here with honest doubt. It's okay to hear prejudice. Oh man. And so Rob's going to have prejudice coming. Okay, I'll do mine first. So prejudice. I looked it up in my 1930s dictionary, my old book, and in mine, oh man, sorry, give me a sec. In mine, it says previous and unfavorable. Why can't I read that word? It's not working. Previous and unfavorable bias. So I got this old idea, and it says prejudgment without due examination. So having an idea about something that I've not actually explored, that I have no experience with, an old idea with no experience. Yeah, Herbert Spencer. Yeah. So Rob popped in the chat the Herbert Spencer quote, which actually isn't Herbert Spencer, but we'll get there. Probably not next week because we might do a holiday themed bounce around, but the week after, where we'll possibly get to the spiritual appendix, which I forgot to mention that I try to avoid as long as possible. Yeah, it was William Paley. I forgot to make the joke the whole time where it's like, go to the appendix. No, thank you. Don't tell me what to do, book. And then we'll do that in a couple weeks. Anywho, so this is the quote. There is a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. And if you're like, what does that mean, Paige? That's just as wordy. It means, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. With the attitude, you got to have the inflection at the end of the I know that idea of I know what it's I know. Here's my experience. I came to the rooms at 12 step and I heard people talk about God and I knew what they meant, and I knew I did not like what they meant. Didn't have the courage to ask them. You know what I mean? If I asked them, what do you mean by God? They might strike up a conversation with me. Ugh. And they might ask me a question that I don't got the answer to, like, how's it going? Oh, I'm dying. I can't tell the weirdos at the meeting the truth. You know what I mean? Ugh. So that's what that looks like. That I knew without a shadow of a doubt what they meant, and that I didn't like it. I didn't ask them. I didn't take spiritual actions to deepen and develop my own relationship with that power, but I know that is what prejudice is. Having a preconceived notion without having any experience. And so we have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious, right? Has that been my experience? To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with someone had tried to impress them during childhood. So that idea of like that God of maybe our childhood. Maybe we had religion shoved down our throats. Or maybe we had that idea of God is a little like Santa Claus. How often do we hear people say, man, I don't believe in the bearded guy in the sky? And what I'll say is, yeah, that's what it's saying. That idea feels inadequate. Now, here's the thing. If the bearded guy in the sky kind of points to a faraway God, and I call it Santa Claus because I imagine that idea of judging. You're good, so you get good things. You're bad, I'm going to give you a lifelong coal, But even if that is my conception of God, a bearded guy in the sky, wonderful. It is a conception, and it is more than a place to start. But a lot of people say, that's not a conception that works for me. That's what it's saying. That's okay. That childhood conception, we can get that out the window if you want. Totally cool. And it says, perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. That feeling, this idea, it's not enough. Keep in mind, and I'm going to talk about this a lot, step 2 is the starting blocks of a lifelong race. It's not the finish line. Man, I got here and I thought I'd just have a spiritual awakening on step 2. And I was like, I didn't. I thought I was supposed to walk hand in hand on the beach with God. Keep in mind, I live in Alberta. It's a landlocked province. We don't have beaches. I don't know where I get that idea from, And so it says, perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. And with that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a capital P power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. And for me, it was less weak and cowardly. It was more, I came into the rooms at 12 step in my early 20s. And when those of you who are in your early 20s or have been in your early 20s, you'll know for some reason, for some ungodly reason, I was attached to the idea of being cool, because being cool is real important. And those of you who have been coming, y'all know I am not cool. Never in my life have I been cool. Cool is not a status I've achieved, but I show up to these church basements and community centers with the coffee creamer that won't stir in, and no matter how hard you try, it just floats at the top. And all of a sudden, I gotta be cool. Pew, pew, pew. Cool page. Hips looking cool. And that whole God thing, that's not cool, right? And actually, I'll talk about it a little bit, because you know what I did? I started to use the word higher power. So we can use synonyms, because that was what the cool kids were doing when I got sober. All the cool kids were using higher power. So I started to use higher power. That's 2 words. And it's a lot of syllables, like too many for me to count in this moment. And I'm like, oh God. And if you're worried, any of you guys that are worried, like, oh, Paige, you got sober in your early 20s, don't worry. I am an efficient alcoholic and drug addict. I burnt my life to the ground efficiently. I got myself into a hopeless, beyond human aid position quite efficiently. And I have a penchant for efficiency. That didn't leave in sobriety. And I started to use the word God simply out of efficiency. And you know what happened is I used that word as I took it to prayer, as I took it to meditation. We'll talk in a little bit about how I took it to inventory. That word began to mean not what I assumed you meant when you used that word. It began to mean what I experienced. And that's what we're after, that with knowing, that experience of God. You know, and this is not a point in time when I was going to talk about this, but I was working with a sponsee, and I looked up the word understand, or understanding, in my 1930s dictionary. And in my unofficial 1930s dictionary, to understand is to know through experience. So when we talk about the God of our understanding, so often we hear, I don't know God, I can't intellectualize God. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Man, understanding means to know through experience. That's something I can do by working the 12 steps. So back on page 46, coming back after the tangent, woo, it says, we looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. What that is saying is that idea of, if there is a God, why is there war? If there is a God, why is there suffering? Why is there tragedy? Why is there all of these things? And I speak a lot about sort of my personal struggles with that. Like when I came to the rooms of 12 Step, there had been a lot of stuff that had happened to me. You know, that stuff that often happens when we're young, and the stuff that happens when we're in, askance. It's doubtfully, suspiciously, skeptically. Askance also, did I read that? No, we're not there. Sorry, I got excited. I'm like, definitions, woo! Again, why would I be excited about being cool? You know what I mean? Woo! Let's look it up in the dictionary. You got an encyclopedia I can read? Woo! Fun. But I came to the rooms of 12 Step with a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, like so many of us do. And a lot of, if there is a God, why was there that personal calamity in my life? Why was there that suffering in my life? If there is a God, why did I go through that? Heck, why did I go through some of the things that I've gone through in sobriety? Why? And I always talk about, I can't answer your why, but I can tell you the answer that I found. And what happened for me is I began to work the steps, because my life depended on it. And I take that word God, and I've taken it to inventory. Column 1, resentments, God. Column 2, those things that have happened. And I began to work that stuff through the inventory, and I began to get some freedom from it. When I shared that with other people, other people in my 5th steps, you know what I mean? I learned I was not alone, and some of that guilt and that shame fell from me. That time in 6 and 7 where those defects begin to fall, and going out and making amends, where just in general, my guilt and my shame leaves me. I began to get more and more freedom. But the answer to my why, if there was a God, why did I go through what I went through? If there was a God, why am I an alcoholic? Why am I a drug addict? Why am I super codependent? Why? The answer to that was found when I started sponsoring others. When I would sit down with them and I could say, yes, me too. Yes, me too, I experienced that. Yes, me too, I went through that. Yes, me too, I drank like that, I used like that, I felt like that. Yes, me too, I crossed that boundary. Yes, me too, that thing happened to me. And here is how I got freedom from it. Yes, me too. And that is why, for me, That's why, because I get to be a small part of the miracle in the lives of others. Page 124 talks about how my dark past becomes my principal asset. And that only happens if I'm willing to grow and rectify errors and convert them into assets. Work in these steps. And that's my experience. So going back to the reading, it says, we looked askance. I got real excited about askance. Who wouldn't? Askance, what a fun word. We looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. So Rob put in the chat where it's askance, doubtfully, suspiciously. And in my 1930s dictionary, askance was, where is it? It's with disdain, you know, like, ugh, like looking at somebody with that, like, ugh. And those people who have done horrible and horrific things and crossed boundaries and lines in the name of God. You know, those people who said they were, you know, we're kind of talking about Henrietta Seiberling. She was kind of a judgy church lady back in the day. It can be that, but it can be people who had positions of power in religious organizations who abuse that power. It's addressing that. It's saying, yes, even that, right? That's been our experience. And then it says, how could a capital S, capital B, supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a capital S, capital B, supreme being anyhow? See, I thought at the second step, I had to understand God. You know, I just had to have a belief that there could be a power. And as a result of taking those actions, I'll come to have a with knowing experience. And this is what opens us up. It says, yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. What opens me up to belief in a power greater than myself? Experience. Experience does. And the most common experience is I come to rooms like this with people like you, and I see that you are happy and sober at the same time, right? And I believe that maybe you're not lying to me about your experience. But those other experiences, you know, I'm blessed to live so close to the Rocky Mountains, some of the most beautiful, like, places on earth, you know, out in the Rockies, and we have a roundup every year in Banff, and it's incredible. And it's that moment, like starlit night by the ocean, you know, those waves, maybe in Cuba, the waves crashing on the ocean, yeah. Or, you know, out in the mountains in that moment of awe and wonder. What opens me up is an experience. Maybe anyone here has ever held a newborn and just had your breath taken away by the preciousness of that moment. That is what opens me up, experience. See, here's my experience. I can't intellect my way to God, but I have to take actions to experience that power. And so those are all our experiences, those barriers and those moments that open us up. And it says, yes, we of agnostic temperament, those of us who are a little not sure, who have barriers, it says, have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. Let us quickly, like we want to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, so laying aside our old ideas, laying aside our preconceived notions, just laying that aside and express even a willingness to believe. So I don't got to believe, I got even a little bit of willingness to believe in a capital P power greater than ourselves. We commence to get results. That's what I'm after. What are the results? Permanent contented sobriety. That's what I want. We commence to get results, even though it was impossible for us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Thank goodness I don't have to comprehend it. I don't have to define it. Just a little bit of belief is enough to start. And anyone here struggle with perfectionism? I'm sure I'm the only one. You know, when I got here, I just realized it was probably the defect of perfectionism that was screaming at me like, no, I got to get this God thing perfect before I work the steps. No, I just got to start with there's an idea, and then I work the steps, and that opens up. And then it says, much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. So you don't have to consider mine. You can if you want. If you're like, man, I don't know if I have a loving God. Borrow mine. Mine loves you so effing much. So much. But you don't have to. You don't have to consider the God of my understanding your own. Yeah, conception. I didn't look that one up in my old-timey dictionary, but Rob's got it. Conception, the sum of a person's ideas and beliefs about something. right? The idea of plan, design, thought, the forming or devising a plan or idea, like that coming, that I don't got to put God together in my mind. I don't have to understand it. I just got to believe that there could be a power. Boom, that's it. That's it. And it says our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. So I have to make the approach. How do I do that? Through the rest of the steps. This is just the starting blocks. It's not the finish line. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a capital C, capital I, creative intelligence, a capital S, capital U, spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. That's the rest of the 12 steps. That's what that is. I got to do the steps. But also, I think as I've been going through this version of the Big Book study, I forgot to like pretend that I hate the spiritual appendix. It sucks, and avoid it. Like, we're going to get to it in a little bit. But the reason I pretend to hate it is because I love finding those beautiful and sneaky descriptions of the spiritual awakening throughout the book, because they're all over. And we just saw one right there. So a description of what a spiritual awakening looks like is that idea of being possessed by a new sense of power and direction, because that would be the result of the other simple steps. And I love that, because man, sometimes I want to over intellectualize what the spiritual awakening looks like. A sense of direction, a sense of power. Boom, I get that. I can do that. It says, we found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. I have to seek. And we're going to do that through the 12 steps through this book. To us, the realm of spirit, capital R, capital S, is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding. See, that conception that feels inadequate, or the belief that you had, no, there's room for your belief. Yes, yours, the one that you have here and now. Yes, it's all-inclusive, never excluding or forbidding. But here's the little caveat: to those who earnestly seek. Again, I have to seek. I seek through these 12 steps as a way of life. I gotta seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. This is open to all of us. All of us. And I thought I was terminally unique. Nope, even me. So even you. And it says, top of 47, when therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. Ideas, whatever comes to mind for you, that's enough. This applies too to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. How cool is that, to be able to well, we'll talk about it. Honestly ask yourself, what does this mean to me? What does this look like in my life? Where can I go from here with that? And it says, do not let any prejudice, old ideas you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. I get to ask. I get to explore. Man, one of the things I love, step 11 for me, is all about that seeking, exploring, and trying new things. And it says, be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they have to offer. I ran with that, not literally, but I had so much fun in seeking. And that's where the joy for me is in. And it says at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth. So again, what we're doing is we're beginning to grow. This isn't the finish line. This isn't the end. We are beginning to grow. And it says, so spiritual growth to affect our first conscious relation with God. Conscious with knowing. And relation, right? I'm building a relationship. And I really love that idea. If this sort of way of looking at it does not resonate with you, that is more than okay. It doesn't have to. You don't have to resonate with the idea of building a relationship. But the reason I really like it is, now I'm probably asking not the right room of people. Anyone here ever date? Because the joke is like, how do you know when an alcoholic's on a second date is got their 2 garbage bags full of stuff in the driveway? It's not a U-Haul. I don't have my life together for that. It's 2 garbage bags full of stuff. So we aren't people that often date. We typically immediately cohabitate. Maybe just me. It's fine. But then you know that idea of dating. When we first start dating, it's a little awkward and uncomfortable and feeling self-conscious, and you don't know each other. Now, if you go on one date and then you go on a second date 5 years later, you're not gonna feel any more connected, are you? But what builds that connection? What builds that connection is consistency. If I continue to build that relationship, and I love that idea of like, for those of you that are married or in a long-term relationship, you know, if you do not speak to your spouse for a while, you're not going to feel very connected. Deeper than that, if we do not listen to our spouse when our spouse is speaking to us, we are not going to feel very connected. And if we're not doing things together, not building and growing a life together, we're not going to feel connected. And so it's that idea that at first, that thing that feels awkward, man, praying felt awkward and uncomfortable at first for me. But with consistency, that relationship grows and it begins to be that source of comfort and relief. So I like that idea of a relational view. So it says afterwards, to affect our first conscious with knowing relation with God as we understood him. Again, through experience, knowing through experience. Afterwards, we found ourselves accepting many things which seemed entirely out of reach. We might have that idea of like, okay, God's going to remove my fear. God's going to remove my defects. That seems entirely out of reach. We don't stress about that. Let's start here. Could there be a power greater than ourselves, right? That was growth. But if we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. So it's okay if our conception feels inadequate. It's okay if it feels limited. Yeah, now we're rocking and rolling. This next paragraph, we're going to kick off. It's a big one. It's going to be the second step proposition. So we're going to get right into it. So it says, we needed to ask ourselves but one short question. So this is it. We're asking ourselves, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power, capital P, greater than myself? And that is a place to start. Now, if you're struggling with that, what I want to point out is we kind of just admitted that alcoholism or our addiction or whatever brought us here is a power greater than ourselves. So that could be an idea. There's got to be something bigger than that, right? But I also like to point out, anyone, and maybe I shouldn't do this as a show of hands. Anyone here ever end up in the back of a police car? I'm sure I'm the only one. All I'm saying is, in my personal experience, the Calgary Police Service has regularly and routinely proved to be a power greater than myself. And there were times in my life where I decided to turn my will and my life over to the care of that power. What I'm saying is we gotta make a decision and go to a kinder, more loving power that'll take us better places. You know what I mean? But all I need to believe is that there is a capital P power greater than myself. Can I start there? Can I believe there? You know what I mean? And so if that's it, and we ask, and it says, as soon as a man can say that he does believe, or is even willing to believe, we emphatically, that means with emphasis, assure him that he is on his way. So if you're willing to say, okay, I'm probably not the most powerful thing in the universe, there's probably a power greater than myself, we can assure you with emphasis that you're on your way. There's that movie where I think it's Mike Myers, where these like an airline, I think it's called Up in the Air, something where it's like we put the wrong emphasis and the wrong syllable. I always think of that. I don't know why I'm referencing that, but we can assure you with emphasis, with enthusiasm, man, you are on your way. This is the start. Could there be a power greater than ourselves? That's it. That's the starting block. And it says, as soon as a man can say he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assured him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, this idea, there could be a power greater than myself, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So that question, do I now believe or am I even willing to believe? That is step 2, part 1. And I love that idea of a cornerstone. So some of you guys, if you've ever seen like churches, just because most of us are in North America, and they have churches, or even an old building, what you'll see is a cornerstone. And that cornerstone is a stone that is symbolically laid. It'll usually say like this building, like built 1909 or 1920, and it is the upon which the building is symbolically built upon. And so the idea that there could be a power greater than myself, that is the idea upon which my spiritual structure can be built. From here, we're going to build. It's not the whole structure. Heck, it's not even the blueprints yet. Ooh, stones. Yeah. Oh man. Oh, so if you're looking in the chat, I won't be able to read that, and I will absolutely bounce around. But we can see all the stones and all the references to masonry and all of that are being built, like the stones and we're going to talk about the archway. Absolutely. You can see all those and bounce around. But I love that idea of a wonderfully effective spiritual structure. Again, this is another weird reference. Y'all remember Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh? You guys remember Winnie the Pooh and then Eeyore? And then he always lost his tail. And then he had to have it hammered back in, which is incredibly dramatic. And I understand why he maybe had some depression issues. Sounds like there's some chronic pain from having his tail hammered back in. Focus page. He lived in this little shack of sticks that were like piled up together, and they'd always fall down, right? That is not a wonderfully effective spiritual structure. What we get to build is something that is wonderful and it is effective. And I'm going to reference some things, and if some of this language doesn't resonate, you don't have to. But you can imagine like a cathedral, or in the Middle East, there's some of these most incredible, like mosques have this incredible, amazing architecture. Imagine building something like that. This beautiful, effective, intricate, solid structure. That's what we're building. We're not building a rinky-dink little Eeyore shack. We're building something powerful, but we're just going to start with this cornerstone, this idea of this is a place to start, Yeah. And it's also, so in the chat, a cornerstone is traditionally also the first stone laid upon which the structure leans on. So this idea, we're leaning on this, just that idea of, could there be a power greater than myself? And then it says, please be sure to read Appendix 2 on a spiritual experience. And because it says please, we will, but we will do that next time. So I think now's a good place to leave it. So thank you all for coming. I'll stop the recording and we'll wrap up with the prayer. So give me a second.